Chapter 1. The First Note, Played in Silence. The lobby of the Halcyon Hotel smelled faintly of lavender and polished marble. Pristine, welcoming, and just sterile enough to match the man who managed it. Gabriel stood behind the reception counter, nodding along to a conversation with a wealthy guest who insisted the bottled water in the minibar didn't taste expensive enough. He smiled the way he always did. Kind, present, and somewhere else entirely behind his warm hazel eyes. "Of course, Mr. Alcott. I'll make sure the concierge brings you a few imported selections personally," Gabriel said, voice smooth like it had been trained for this. Because it had. Grief trained him. 5 years of grief could make anyone a master of calm. As the man wandered away toward the elevators, Gabriel exhaled and tugged at the collar of his navy suit. Perfectly pressed, impeccably tailored. The uniform of a man who'd built a life so tight, so clean, no grief could leak through. "Do you ever rest, boss?" Milo's voice chirped behind him. The front desk clerk was barely out of his 20s, with a mop of curly hair, a lip ring, and a habit of narrating Gabriel's every sigh. "Rest is for the guests," Gabriel replied with a smile that almost touched his eyes. Milo made a dramatic face. "God, that's so tragic, like a hot widower Hallmark movie waiting to happen." Gabriel's smile twitched. Back to work. But even Milo's teasing couldn't puncture the bubble Gabriel lived in, a world of dinner reservations, linen reports, and checking his daughter's lunchbox before school. If he kept moving, he didn't have to remember, didn't have to feel, and no one ever saw past it, except Lily. That night, over spaghetti and a cluttered kitchen table, Lily's brown eyes, too sharp for 11, peered up from her plate. "Can I do piano lessons?" she asked between bites. Gabriel blinked, startled. "Piano? I want to be good at something, like actually good, not just like okay at dodgeball." He raised an eyebrow, trying not to smile. "You're great at dodgeball," she rolled her eyes. "Dad, I got hit in the face 3 times yesterday. Please, just piano. I promise I'll stick with it." Gabriel looked at her, really looked. She had her mother's eyes, and her fire. Lately she'd been asking more questions. Questions about love. About memories. About why you never bring anyone home, Dad. He took a deep breath. "There's a studio near the park. We can visit tomorrow." Lily squealed, "Yes, you're the best!" She ran off to text Tina about it, her socks sliding across the hardwood floor. Gabriel sat back, twirling his fork in what was now cold pasta. He didn't want to say no, but music felt dangerous. Music made you feel things. He didn't need that. Still, the next day, they went. The studio was tucked between a florist and a bakery that always smelled like cardamom and sugar. It didn't look like much from the outside, white stone and a wooden door. But when Gabriel pushed it open, he paused. It was warm. Not just heated. Warm. Sunlight spilled through high windows. Ferns curled along the walls. A rack of sheet music stood beside a couch stacked with soft pillows. A small bench held drawings from children, stick figures next to piano keys, doodles of cats playing music, and in the center of it all stood the grand piano. Black, glossy. Its lid open like wings. Lily gasped, "Dad, it's so pretty!" Gabriel nodded, but his eyes were on the man standing beside it. Matthew looked up from adjusting the sheet music, smiling as if he'd been expecting them. His hair was soft and tousled, somewhere between golden and chestnut, his face gently angled, lips curved like he smiled easily, and often. But his eyes? His eyes were the kind that made Gabriel forget what he'd been about to say. Blue, calm, unapologetically present. "You must be Lily," Matthew said, kneeling to her level. She beamed. "I am. I want to learn piano, like for real, not just finger plinking." Matthew laughed. "Then we'll skip the finger plinking and go straight to real music." He glanced up at Gabriel. "You must be Dad." "Gabriel," he said, extending a hand. Matthew's grip was warm, strong, but not pushy. "Matthew," he replied. "Welcome to my sanctuary." Gabriel tried to chuckle. It came out dry. "Seems more welcoming than most sanctuaries." Matthew grinned. "Music has to be, especially when the world isn't." They watched Lily settle on the piano bench, legs swinging. Matthew sat beside her and began explaining the layout of the keys, guiding her fingers with a patience that made Gabriel's throat ache. No rush, no pressure, just space. And when Lily mentioned offhandedly, "Mom used to play music in the kitchen all the time," Gabriel froze. Matthew didn't flinch, but his eyes flicked up to Gabriel. Gabriel's hand clenched at his side. Just a twitch. A breath caught. A silent ripple of pain he was sure no one ever noticed. Matthew did. He didn't say anything, but the next words to Lily were soft, slower. Music is a lot like love, he told her. It changes the space around it, makes things feel fuller, safer, even when it hurts a little. Gabriel blinked, his chest tightening. Lily laughed. You're kind of a nerd. I absolutely am, Matthew agreed, smiling. The lesson flew by. An hour passed like 10 minutes. Gabriel barely moved, watching them from a chair by the window. Lily's laughter filled the room. Her fingers, shaky at first, began pressing simple notes. He never once corrected with annoyance. He redirected with delight. At the end, Lily turned, eyes wide. Dad, can we come back? Gabriel opened his mouth, closed it, then nodded. Yeah, we can. That night, after Lily was asleep, Gabriel sat on the edge of his bed, the lights dimmed. His suit jacket still hung over the back of the chair. He hadn't touched it. He stared up at the ceiling. At nothing. At everything. Matthew's voice, smooth and low, lingered in his head like the last note of a symphony. Music doesn't heal pain. It just helps you feel it without breaking apart. Gabriel wasn't sure he could handle either. But somehow, he wanted to hear that voice again. Not just for Lily, not just for the music, but for himself. And he hated that. He hated that something inside him, something fragile and stupid and still aching, was waking up. Because once music starts, you can't unhear it. And Gabriel was starting to feel the silence breaking. Chapter 2. The Chord That Breaks a Heart Open. The Halcyon's lobby bustled with quiet luxury. Floral arrangements changed daily, floor tiles buffed to a soft sheen, and music, always soft music, drifting from invisible speakers. Gabriel strode across the gleaming marble, clipboard in hand, his brain juggling maintenance requests, VIP check-ins, and next week's staff meeting. He was halfway to the front desk when he stopped short. There, seated casually on one of the velvet lounge chairs, like he belonged in the middle of a magazine spread, was Matthew. He looked like he'd stepped out of a softer world. Dressed in a pale linen shirt and dark trousers, a leather notebook on his lap, he was smiling. As Milo leaned across the counter, telling him a dramatic story with far too many hand gestures, Gabriel felt something shift in his chest. Something tight. Milo spotted him first and lit up. Oh, boss, you'll never guess who came to grace our marble halls. He gestured dramatically to Matthew, the literal music man himself. Matthew stood smoothly, closing his notebook. Hi, Gabriel. His voice was a melody even in a mundane greeting. Gabriel blinked. You staying here? He asked, trying not to sound too startled. Matthew chuckled. Not quite. I'm here for a guest, Mrs. Ashburn. She's staying in the penthouse suite, I believe. Gabriel's brow lifted. You know Mrs. Ashburn? She taught me music theory when I was 12, and still convinced I could make instruments levitate by sheer will, Matthew said. She's an old friend. She likes to test the patience of hotel staff by requesting her tea be stirred clockwise only. Gabriel laughed before he could stop himself. It was low and surprised, almost rusty. Matthew tilted his head. There it is. There what? That sound, Matthew said, eyes crinkling just slightly. Your real laugh? I was starting to think you didn't come with one. Gabriel shook his head, but a reluctant smile tugged at his lips. Careful. You'll ruin my reputation as a professional sad man. I'm willing to take the risk. Their eyes held. Too long. Not accidental. Not yet a confession, but something. A throat cleared. Milo. Should I leave you two alone, or... Gabriel snapped back to attention, adjusting the clipboard. Mrs. Ashburn is still at the spa. I'll send someone to notify you when she returns to her room. Perfect, Matthew said. Maybe I'll grab a drink at the bar. Feel free. Matthew winked just once and walked off toward the lounge. Gabriel watched him go. His heart felt like it was playing chords he hadn't touched in years. That evening, the apartment was filled with music. Not professional, not polished, but sweet and relentless. Lily was practicing Für Elise on her portable keyboard with a kind of ferocious devotion that made Gabriel alternate between pride and mild panic. Every few bars, she'd mutter something under her breath. No, no! Again! You're being very hard on yourself, Gabriel said from the kitchen, sipping lukewarm tea. I want to be good, Dad. The recital's next week. Gabriel's chest tightened. You don't have to be perfect. Just have fun. Matt says music isn't about perfection. It's about presence, Lily replied, parroting Matthew's tone almost exactly. But I still want to make you proud. You already do, every day. She smiled at him, her fingers resting on the keys. Will you come? She asked softly. He knew what she meant. To the recital. He didn't answer. Not then. The hall was small, intimate, filled with folding chairs and folding programs printed on recycled paper. A few dozen parents chatted politely, some wrangling toddlers or smoothing dresses. The air buzzed with pride and nerves. Gabriel stood just inside the entrance, frozen. He couldn't breathe. The stage looked too much like the one where Isabel had once sung. The red curtains too close to the shade she'd loved, the lights too warm, the smell of wooden floors and floor polish too familiar. His chest ached. A hand brushed his sleeve. He turned, and Matthew was there. Dressed in a navy vest over a black button-up, sleeves rolled to his forearms. His expression softened the moment he saw Gabriel's face. You okay? Gabriel opened his mouth, but the words tangled. I can't. I thought I could, but... Matthew didn't hesitate. He reached out, gently took Gabriel's hand. His fingers were warm and grounding. He didn't pull. He just stood, quietly offering. Gabriel let himself be led. They sat near the front, but not center. Matthew didn't let go. When Lily walked on stage, her dark hair tied back with a sparkly headband, Gabriel felt his throat close. She glanced into the audience, saw him, beamed. He forced himself to smile. But when her fingers hit the keys and the first few notes spilled out, unsteady but full of heart, something inside him cracked. He didn't cry like someone sobbing at a movie. It wasn't loud, just a slow, silent fall. A single tear. Then another. Matthew noticed. His hand turned under Gabriel's, fingers interlacing. He didn't say a word. But the touch said enough. You're not alone. Not right now. The piece ended. Lily stood and bowed, flushed with triumph. Gabriel clapped. The loudest. Even if his hands shook. Outside the recital hall, Lily practically bounced. That was the best thing ever, she squealed, hugging Matthew first. Did I mess up the ending? Not at all, Matthew said. You played with heart. That's all that matters. She turned to Gabriel, suddenly shy. Did I do okay, Dad? Gabriel crouched down, cupping her face. You were magic, he said hoarsely. Her smile lit up the night. Matthew walked them to the car. Thank you, Gabriel said, keys jangling in his hand. For everything. Matthew hesitated. You don't owe me that. I think I do. You loved her a lot, Matthew said gently. I still do. Matthew nodded. That's not something to apologize for. Gabriel didn't answer. They stood in silence until Lily called from the car. Night, Matt. Good night, Lily. He called back, smiling. Gabriel climbed in and drove home with shaking hands. That night, the hotel lights blinked far in the distance. Gabriel stood barefoot on his balcony, a glass of something dark in his hand, untouched. The night air was cool. He stared out across the skyline. Music still echoed in his mind. Not Lily's piece, not the clapping, but Matthew's voice, his hand warm in his. The way he never flinched when Gabriel broke. He raised the glass, set it back down, whispered into the dark, I don't deserve good things anymore. And somewhere far away, like a note you're not sure you imagined, the wind carried a single impossible echo. Maybe you do. Chapter 3. Lessons in Touch. Lessons in Trust. The piano studio had become a sanctuary, not just for Lily, but for Gabriel too. He hadn't meant for it to happen. It started with a single nod to Lily's request, a harmless okay when she said, Can you stay this time? It's just cooler when you're there. He hadn't expected it to matter, but it did. From his seat by the window, Gabriel watched Matthew with an intensity he hadn't allowed himself in years. Not just because the man was beautiful, though objectively he was. The lean, fluid grace with which he moved, the way his soft curls bounced when he laughed, the delicate lines around his eyes that deepened when he smiled. No, it was the way he taught that caught Gabriel by the throat. Matthew didn't just teach music. He translated it. To a small boy with anxiety, Matthew crouched and whispered, There's no such thing as wrong notes, only notes that haven't found their friends yet. To a shy girl afraid of playing solo, he said, The keys are just waiting to meet you. And to Lily, he gave nothing but space and belief. He let her falter, encouraged her to try again, let her be messy without ever seeming disappointed. It was disarming. Matthew glowed around children. Gabriel found himself staying even after the lesson ended, pretending to check work emails on his phone while listening to Matthew talk to the kids and their parents, always warm, always fully present. One day, as they stood outside locking up, Gabriel said without thinking, You're really good with them. Matthew glanced over, curious. With who? Kids. People. You don't just talk to them, you see them. Matthew smiled, a little soft, a little sad. I like showing people they're more than their scars. The words hit harder than they should have. Gabriel nodded, lips pressing tight. He said nothing, but he didn't forget. The next day was chaos. Gabriel got the call at 1:22 p.m. He was reviewing room service metrics when his phone rang with Lily's school number flashing on the screen. Falling from a tree. A broken arm. Not life-threatening, but she was scared. By the time he got to the hospital, he could barely breathe. He found her in the ER room, small and pale, her left arm cradled in a temporary sling, eyes swollen from crying. Dad! She burst into sobs the second she saw him. Gabriel rushed to her, scooping her into his arms carefully, pressing his cheek against her forehead. I'm here. I'm here. It's okay. You're safe. He didn't notice the tears until they slipped off his own face and into her hair. He held it together, barely, as the doctor explained the fracture, the cast, the healing timeline. Lily clutched his shirt with her good hand. Gabriel never let go. They were still in the recovery room when a soft knock came at the door. Matthew, holding a tiny gift bag. Gabriel stared. How? Lily's best friend, Tina, posted about it, Matthew said quietly, offering the bag. Lily opened it with her one good hand. Inside was a delicate music box shaped like a bunny, soft white with tiny carved flowers on its ears. When she twisted the key, it played a lullaby. A gentle melody that wasn't overly sweet, just peaceful. Oh my God, he plays music, she whispered, sniffling through a smile. He's my second favorite adult. Gabriel's eyebrows lifted. Second? I mean, duh, she said with exaggerated tweenery. You're first. Matthew grinned. I'll take silver. Gabriel smiled too, small and weary, but real. They left just before sundown. Gabriel offered Matthew a ride. He didn't think twice about it. The man had shown up without being asked. That meant something. The drive was quiet at first. Matthew sat relaxed in the passenger seat, his fingers idly tracing the side seam of his jeans. Gabriel's grip on the wheel was tight at 10 and 2. You did well today, Matthew said eventually. Gabriel gave a short breath of a laugh. I felt like I was unraveling in front of everyone. Maybe. But Lily only saw the man who came running. Silence. Then Gabriel said quietly, It's always like that. The panic. Like I'm watching it all happen again, the day I lost her. Matthew didn't push. Gabriel glanced at him. She fell in the kitchen. It was a freak thing. No warning. No goodbye. Just one moment I was holding coffee. The next, I was holding her and screaming for an ambulance. His voice cracked. Matthew stayed quiet, letting the words live in the air. She was younger than me, Gabriel continued. Healthier, smarter, better with Lily. But she died, and I didn't. And sometimes I think maybe I deserve to stay behind. To pay for that. Matthew's voice was soft, but firm. Don't say that. Gabriel parked in front of Matthew's building. The engine hummed. The city pulsed outside, but the car was a stillness neither man wanted to shatter too quickly. Matthew turned toward him. You didn't stay behind to pay. You stayed behind for Lily. And she's not broken, Gabriel. That's you. Gabriel looked at him, eyes glossy, guard cracking. He exhaled shakily. I haven't touched anyone, really touched, since my wife. Matthew nodded once, slow. Touch doesn't always have to be a symphony. Gabriel tilted his head. Matthew leaned in just slightly, not close enough to kiss, but close enough to feel warm breath. Sometimes it doesn't have to be a grand song. Sometimes a single note is enough. Then gently he let his hand rest over Gabriel's. Their fingers brushed. Gabriel didn't move. He trembled. Not from fear, but from something else. Something waking. He looked down at their hands. He didn't pull away. Matthew smiled, small and steady. I'll see you at her lesson, Gabriel nodded. He sat in the car long after Matthew had gone inside, fingers still tingling. And for the first time in 5 years, the silence in his heart didn't feel like a grave. It felt like the space before a song begins. Chapter 4. The Harmony We Never Planned For. The Halcyon Hotel gleamed that evening, every brass railing polished, every chandelier flickering golden. Waiters floated with trays of champagne flutes and salmon canapes. The annual charity gala was the kind of event Gabriel had orchestrated 100 times before. He wore his armor, a tailored black suit, hair neatly combed back, smile tight and professional. But tonight, there was an added inconvenience. Her name was Marissa, and she was Sandra's latest matchmaking attempt. She's beautiful, she runs her own business, and she thinks you're so noble, Sandra had whispered that morning over coffee, beaming with that relentless older sister energy Gabriel had no defenses against. She thinks I'm what? Noble, in the tragic, handsome, widower kind of way. Don't screw this up. Lily had overheard and groaned. Seriously, this again? Gabriel didn't argue. He never did. He just showed up, as expected. It was easier to survive things than to explain why he didn't want to try. Now, under the soft glow of the ballroom, Marissa laughed too loudly at something he barely heard. She wore a tight red dress and kept touching his arm like it was part of the dance. "So, your daughter," she said with a sip of champagne. "She's how old?" 11. Right? That's the age where they're either angels or monsters, huh? Gabriel gave a tight smile. "And your wife?" She asked, with a tone that tried to sound casual but wasn't. "She passed away 5 years ago." Marissa blinked. "Oh, wow. That's a long time to be alone." "I haven't been alone," Gabriel said evenly. "I have Lily." "Well, sure, but you know what I mean. Eventually you've got to stop clinging to a ghost, right?" The words hit him like ice water. Gabriel felt his spine straighten, his jaw tighten. "Excuse me," he said softly, stepping away. He moved toward the edge of the ballroom, away from the lights, away from the curated laughter. He stood by the grand piano near the stage, gripping the edge of the table, trying to breathe. And that's when he heard it. Music. Familiar. Slow. Tender. He turned. Matthew. Seated at the piano like he belonged nowhere else. His hands moved gracefully, confidently, but the piece wasn't for the crowd. It wasn't a showy jazz number or an upbeat standard. It was soft, emotional, something original. Gabriel knew it in his bones. Matthew's eyes lifted just once, from the keys to him. Gabriel realized in that instant the song was for Lily, for her bravery, for her piano, for her light, but it was also for him. The crowd quieted. People turned, drawn on by the weight of something real in the room. And still, Matthew didn't look away. When the song ended, polite applause filled the air. But Gabriel didn't move, couldn't. Not until he saw Matthew disappear behind the side curtain and head toward the bar. Gabriel followed. He found him at the far end, sipping a soda, sleeves rolled up to his elbows, still glowing slightly from the performance. "You always rescue me?" Gabriel asked. Matthew turned, his expression unreadable, but his eyes, warm, knowing. "I just hate seeing you disappear behind yourself." Gabriel's throat tightened. They stood in silence. Then Matthew said, "You looked like you needed saving." Gabriel exhaled. "I did." Neither of them said it, but they both knew the gala was over, for them. They left quietly, unnoticed. Matthew's apartment was exactly what Gabriel expected, and nothing like it. Soft lamplight, shelves filled with sheet music and framed drawings from his students. The piano in the corner stood like a faithful friend. A record player hummed in the background, playing something old and jazzy. The couch looked too comfortable to be stylish, and the whole place smelled like cinnamon tea and clean linen. Matthew slipped off his shoes and offered a hand towel. "You want some tea?" Gabriel shook his head. "No tea." Matthew looked over, curious. "Okay, wine?" "No." A pause. "Then what do you want?" Matthew asked, stepping closer. Gabriel's voice dropped, rough and exposed. "You." For a second, neither moved. Then Matthew closed the distance and cupped Gabriel's face like he was something fragile, but needed. The kiss was slow. Careful. Desperate. Gabriel tasted the quiet promises between them. Tasted 5 years of hunger he hadn't let himself feel. His hands found Matthew's waist, then his shirt, then skin. They didn't stumble. They moved together like they'd done this in dreams. Like the space between them had always been meant to close. Clothes fell away in pieces. Touch by touch. When they reached the bed, Matthew didn't rush. Every move was permission. Every breath was a question. And Gabriel answered with his body, with the way he leaned into each touch, each kiss, like it might anchor him back to himself. Halfway through, Gabriel faltered. His hands stilled, his eyes filled. "I can't," he whispered. "I don't know how to do this without breaking." Matthew pulled him in tighter, forehead against his. "Then break," he said gently. "I'll hold the pieces." And he did. They didn't chase ecstasy. They found solace, softness, a rhythm made of trust, of rediscovery, of surrender. When it ended, Gabriel lay against Matthew's chest, tangled in sheets, breathless. He didn't speak for a long time. Then, into the quiet, "I thought I was done being loved." Matthew's fingers traced lazy circles across his back. You weren't, he said. You were just waiting for someone who meant it. Gabriel let the words settle, and this time he didn't push them away. He curled closer, finally letting himself rest. Chapter 5. The Note That Almost Got Lost. There was a change in Gabriel that week, and everyone around him noticed. He smiled more. Not the forced, charming hotelier smile that had become his signature over the past 5 years, but a real one. The kind that snuck up on him when he wasn't paying attention. Over coffee, in the elevator, watching Lily braid her hair lopsided. Okay, who are you, and what have you done with my brooding boss? Milo asked one morning at the Halcyon's front desk, eyeing Gabriel suspiciously over his tablet. Did your facial muscles finally give up and let you be happy? Gabriel snorted. I have no idea what you're talking about. Oh, sure. The man who used to make statues look warm is now humming while reading maintenance logs. You're either in love or heavily medicated. Sandra's words, however, weren't as playful. She's starting to really like him. She said during their weekly dinner at his apartment, cutting her roasted vegetables with slow precision. Gabriel froze mid-sip of wine. Lily? She talks about him constantly. Matt said this. Matt helped me with that. Matt bought me a bunny music box that plays Debussy. Gabriel. Her gaze met his. Don't let her get attached if it's not going somewhere. You know she can't take another loss. Neither can you. He opened his mouth to respond, but nothing came out. Later that night, Lily sat on the floor in her pajamas practicing finger drills on the portable keyboard while watching TV. She looked up and grinned. You look smiley today. Did something happen with Matt? Gabriel froze again, and this time something inside him clenched. The next morning, he canceled Lily's lesson. Just this week, he said quickly, breezing through breakfast. I've got too much going on at work. Lily blinked at him. We've been going every week. You never miss it. I know. Just one lesson. I'll call Matt and explain. But he didn't call. And the week after that, he canceled again. Then again. By the third week, Matthew stopped texting. Not out of spite, but silence had its own weight, and Gabriel felt it pressing harder each day. The apartment grew quieter, the laughter thinned. Lily stopped humming her warm-up scales around the house. He told himself it was for the best. He told himself it was safer this way. For Lily. For him. For Matthew. But when he came home one Thursday and found her not in her room, not in the kitchen, not in the apartment at all, he knew. His heart dropped into his stomach. He called Tina. No answer. Called her school. She left with a guardian, the receptionist said uncertainly. No, wait, maybe she said something about piano. Gabriel was already in the car. The studio door was unlocked when he arrived, and there she was. Lily, sitting at the bench, arms crossed in her cast. Her expression thunderous. Matthew stood nearby, silent, unsure what to say. He looked up the second Gabriel stormed in. Lily, Gabriel breathed. You can't run off like that. You ditched him, she snapped. You lied. Gabriel stepped back, startled. I didn't. Yes, you did. You said you were too busy, but you weren't. You were scared. He turned toward Matthew, who hadn't spoken yet. You knew she was here? I came back from teaching another student and found her waiting outside, Matthew said quietly. She wanted to talk. Gabriel clenched his jaw. That's not safe. She's not a baby, Matthew said. She needed answers. Lily's eyes were burning, so I asked him something. Gabriel's voice dropped. Lily, I asked if he loves you. The room turned to glass. Matthew's voice was steady. I told her the truth. Gabriel looked at him, every part of his body stiff. Matthew continued, his tone tender but firm. Yes, I love you, but I can't force you to love yourself enough to love me back. That cracked something. Gabriel's control, so tightly wound for years, started to come undone. I'm terrified, he said suddenly. You think I'm calm? That I've got this under control? I wake up every day wondering if I'm going to lose her. Wondering if it's my fault she only has one parent left. Lily's face softened just a bit. And you, Gabriel said to Matthew. You walked into my life like a goddamn song I forgot how to play, and it felt so good I wanted to scream. And then I started thinking, what if I let myself have this? What if I let Lily get too close? And it all disappears again? Matthew was quiet. You're not the one who hurt her, he said softly. Or me, but you are the one who's running away. Gabriel's throat closed. He turned, muttered something, and left the studio in a rush. Lily called after him. But he didn't stop. At home, he sat in the dark. The apartment was too quiet, too clean, too sterile. He poured himself a glass of wine, then didn't drink it. Instead, he went to the hallway closet and pulled down the old shoebox he hadn't touched in 5 years. Photos, receipts, hospital forms, and folded at the bottom, a birthday card. It was from Isabel, his last birthday before she died. Inside, her neat handwriting filled the card. "You're the best man I know, Gabriel, and the best father. I don't know what I did to deserve you, but I hope, if anything ever happens to me, you'll let someone love you the way you always loved me. With everything." He stared at the words until they blurred. And then, quietly, painfully, he broke. He cried until he couldn't breathe, until the memories stopped clawing and just sat beside him. He didn't know what tomorrow would be, but he knew this. He was done running. Chapter 6: The Duet We Didn't Know We Needed. The music school's small auditorium buzzed with excitement, the energy of children in dress shoes and clip-on ties vibrating against rows of neatly lined chairs. Proud parents whispered encouragement from the wings while teachers tuned instruments with practiced calm. Gabriel stood in the back, heart pounding harder than it had in years. He was overdressed in a suit jacket and still not sure if he deserved to be here. But Lily was already on stage, in her cast and sparkly headband, shoulders square, feet swinging above the floor, waiting for her name to be called. The last few weeks had felt like standing outside a locked door, holding the key and being too afraid to turn it. But tonight, the key burned in his pocket. He had things to say, things that mattered. When Lily's name was called, the crowd applauded politely. She walked to the center of the stage and sat at the piano. Her fingers hovered, uncertain. Gabriel stepped forward. She looked up, and when she saw him, really saw him standing in the aisle, hands trembling, her face lit up like sunrise. She began to play. Simple, sweet, wobbly in the beginning, but growing stronger with each note. A piece she and Matthew had practiced 100 times. But tonight it sounded like more than music. It sounded like a promise, a bridge built across weeks of silence and hesitation. Gabriel didn't realize he'd walked all the way to the edge of the stage until the applause broke out around him. And before anyone could stop him, he stepped up. He walked to the mic, cleared his throat, and faced the small crowd. "My name is Gabriel," he began, voice raw but steady. "I'm Lily's father." The room quieted. "I wasn't going to speak. I wasn't even sure I deserved to be here tonight. But I watched my daughter play just now, and I realized she's not the only one who's been learning something." He looked to the side of the stage, where Matthew stood, barely visible in the wings, arms crossed, expression unreadable. "I want to thank the man who helped her find that music, who gave her the space to be brave, and who, somehow, helped me find the pieces of myself I thought I'd buried with the past." He took a breath. "You didn't just teach Lily, you taught me too. To live, to feel again. To stop being afraid of the good things." Gabriel's eyes found Matthew's. "And I'm done being afraid." The room was silent, then thunderous applause. Lily ran up to him, beaming, and hugged his waist. "You were amazing," she whispered. He smiled, eyes still locked on the man who stood like an unanswered question. Until Matthew moved forward. Later that evening, Gabriel opened the door to his apartment and stepped aside to let Matthew in. Matthew glanced around, cautious. "You sure?" Gabriel nodded. "Yeah, this time, I'm sure." The apartment had changed in small ways. Warmer lighting, a plant by the window, and in the corner where the keyboard used to be stood a real piano, a deep brown upright, polished, waiting. Matthew stared. "You got a piano?" "For her," Gabriel said, then softer, "and for you." Matthew stepped closer, touched the keys like they might vanish. Then he sat, played one soft chord. Gabriel joined him awkwardly at first, pressing a single note that didn't quite fit. Matthew chuckled. "It's not about being perfect." Gabriel met his eyes. "I know." They played together. Not a song exactly, just notes finding each other, one after the other. A slow, unspoken duet. When Matthew finally stopped, the silence felt full, not empty. Gabriel leaned in, pressed their foreheads together, then kissed him. Slow, deep, needing. There was no hesitation now. Clothes slipped away, fingers mapped familiar lines. Breathless laughter tangled with heat. They didn't rush. Every touch was a homecoming. In Gabriel's bed, their bodies fit like verses to a melody long forgotten. Midway through, Gabriel's voice cracked. "I never thought I'd feel this again." Matthew kissed his shoulder. You didn't lose it, you were just waiting to give it to the right person. After, they lay together, skin against skin, no words needed. Just silence, safe and warm. Later, under a velvet sky strung with fairy lights, Gabriel led Matthew up to the halcyon rooftop. The space had been dressed up, a bottle of wine, 2 glasses, music playing low. Fairy lights twinkled overhead like stars had decided to get closer. Milo poked his head out of the stairwell, eyes already wet. "Okay, I'm gonna cry, so I'm leaving before this turns into a movie." "Love you too," Gabriel called. Behind him, Lily screamed from the doorway, "Finally!" before disappearing with a giggle. Matthew laughed. "She planned this, didn't she?" Gabriel didn't deny it. He just turned, took Matthew's hand, and kissed his knuckles. "I don't want you to stay for her," he said. "I want you to stay for me." Matthew reached into his pocket, pulled out a small key. "I already made myself at home," he said. Gabriel pulled him in and kissed him again. No music this time, just the rhythm of hearts finally in sync. Somewhere between loss and music, between grief and healing, Gabriel found the one man who didn't fix him, but stayed long enough to help him believe in love again.